the combined experiences with the day-to-day life that it takes trying to manage everything that comes with, as y'all know, being a college student in general, but then on top of that, having athletics. And I think when we talk about maybe some of the disadvantages, I don't know so much if I'd say that there were disadvantages, because I think everybody has a unique college experience, and I think everybody has some things that works really well in their favor, and some people have things that maybe you got to work another job or maybe two jobs to get by. And so I wouldn't say it was a disadvantage, but something that made it tougher um, was it was really hard to network. It was really hard to get that exposure throughout college and get that experience, maybe with an internship
Hmm.
or just being able to go to seminars and events and kind of shake hands and go through that whole profile. I think that that was probably one of the toughest things to overcome as you enter the real world, because connections is really on you at that point, uh, to kind of take that next step, go outside of your comfort zone, try to find the time within your schedule to meet professors, faculty, whoever it is, and get plugged in with some people that's in your field of study, that in a career that you potentially think that you want to get into. So I'd say that that was one that was pretty tough to navigate as a student athlete.
Yeah, and I don't know for everyone else if your professors have started harping on this. I know as soon as you get into the sport management program, they do, but a huge part of the college experience is outside of the classroom, those internships, those networking opportunities. So when you start to talk about things that physically, time wise, prevent you, it makes it even harder to overcome. It's harder to kind of get by. So we start to see why hopefully more and more athletic programs are starting to put emphasis on that for student athletes. So there's whole new positions and programs in place for that, just because it's an area that if you're kind of cut off from for a while and it's just you're told you can't do it, it makes it tough, especially if you're trying to, think about a career outside of sport, I would imagine. So I don't know if you mentioned it, but you started a club here, an organization called Collective Uplift. When you were here, you were undergrad. It
Yep.
still was running at least when I was a sophomore. I know Dr. Cooper,
Yep.
who those of you that aren't part of the sport management program was a professor in that for a while. Helped you start that. He isn't here anymore. But if you would just give like a 30-second pitch on, because I know it's amazing, and I know you're passionate about what it was doing when you were here. Just a 30-second pitch on what that was and kind of what led to you and some of your teammates founding that.
Yeah, and I want to harp on Dr. Cooper. I don't know if y'all had the opportunity to meet Dr. Cooper, but one of the most amazing people that you will ever meet. I highly, right now, he's serving as the endowed chairman for sport administration at Boston UMass. He loves connecting with UConn students. He's a huge asset and a resource. I would highly recommend just emailing him, shooting him email, tell him that I sent you. I'm sure he'll respond, and he's just another really good tool to have. Um,
Hold on, just to interrupt you real quick, I just want to second that. Just
yeah,
as a personal anecdote, I knew Dr. Cooper a little bit working through SBA. I never actually had him as a professor because he left before I got into the program, but someone I still met with like once a month, I still keep in contact with now. He was kind enough to offer to write one of my letters of recommendation, and this is someone I never even actually had a physical class with. So just a second, what Sean's saying, like an excellent guy. We're more than happy to help you connect with him if you would are interested in that at the end of the meeting. But sorry to interrupt.
no, yeah, definitely. So Dr. Cooper was one of the biggest reasons why I went back and got my master's degree. So we can talk about that journey in a little bit, but Collective Uplift, it was a group that was founded by myself, a couple other teammates at Dr. Cooper. And basically what that was it was a group that was built on the holistic development of student athletes, particularly Black student athletes on the campus. The football team was predominantly Black, and we didn't feel like we had a space that, one, we can just go and talk about some of the issues that we're feeling on campus, one as a student athlete, but also just as a underrepresented minority within the broader context of campus, and some of our needs that we kind of wanted to formulate, put down on paper, and just have the conversations about. And then also one of the huge things that we wanted to address was the networking aspect of it, and the ability to get outside of the comfort zone, like we talked about earlier. Bring people in that were in fields that we were interested in, being able to have that exposure, and then also just that type of feel that you get being a part of an organization on campus. It was a blessing. And one of the things that it did is it started with four of us, and like I said earlier, it was centered particularly around student athletes. After the second year, it expanded to everybody. Everybody, whether you were a student athlete, was more than welcome to come. We had people majoring in bio. We had people that was majoring in AFAM and agricultural studies. We had the broad range of um, students that were studying things, and it really became this holistic leadership development type of community that we just continuously supported each other in whatever endeavors that you were on, connect you with any resources that we had. It really was just that type of family. I hope it's still running out. I know COVID has had some issues, and has definitely kind of halted a lot of different things. But if y'all ever get the chance to check out a meeting, I highly recommend it. They have some really good critical conversations about real life things. You grow as a person, you learn different perspectives. And it's also that, again, to this day, I'll get recommendations from people that went through Collective Uplift. They'll hear job opportunities, and we spread that message around to everybody that was in that community. And some really powerful things have come out of CU. Right now, Collective Uplift is at UConn. It's at Washington and Lee University. It's at Old Dominion University. And we're starting one right now at Shenandoah University as well. Again, just that holistic development principle that we harp on so much, and bringing it to everybody that wants to be a part of it.
Yeah, two quick things. One, I actually got to attend one of the in-person meetings before COVID shut it down and everything. I'm not a student athlete here at UConn, and I still had an incredible time there. It was an awesome environment. It's, as you said, welcoming to anyone that wants to come in and just kind of sit, listen, learn, and talk. So hopefully some of the younger people on the call, once things kind of open back up in person, you'll have the opportunity to attend one of those. And one thing I just want to pull out there, a word you used a couple times, was that holistic part of development. And for those of you that maybe haven't heard that a lot yet, if you have any desire to work in college athletics or kind of development at all, it's a word you're going to be hearing a lot. So could you kind of, in your words, just kind of define what that really means real quick?
Yeah, the holistic is a word that, again, it's one of those buzzwords that you'll hear, and that basically just means the development of the entire person. So when we were talking about it from CU standpoint, we got a lot of development as an athlete, but we didn't really get to grow and expand in any different areas outside of that. And the holistic development part was looking at the entirety of the person, trying to grow in every way possible. And I think to the point that was made, as you get into athletics, now you see positions that are student success centered. You'll see positions that are just for alumni relations, positions that are just for very specific jobs. And I think that, to the point is, universities are understanding how important that development, the holistic approach is, instead of just kind of, you're a student athlete, you stay a student athlete, we'll control the athletics. I think that we're transitioning into a space, which I'm excited about, where they look at the entire person and they want the entire person to be successful, not just on the field, on the court, or whatever your sport has you at, but also making sure that you transition well from a developmental standpoint, a character standpoint, and also being able to transition into the career world and being work ready, instead of just kind of thrown into the fire, as a lot of student athletes unfortunately are.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, like, we see so many new colleges creating specific positions around this. I think it's something important to note, especially entering the career force. I mean, it's true with a lot of businesses, but college sports, I think especially, is follow the money, and to kind of see where the emphasis is. And if we're starting to see more funds being dumped into creating these programs, which is awesome, we start to see a little bit more emphasis being put on it. So definitely something to keep in mind is some of y'all are thinking about getting out there into the working world. So the next kind of portion I want to talk on is, you came back to school after trying to play in the league for a bit, and got your master's. And I know that's a decision pretty much everyone is going to hit here at some point. Once I graduate undergrad, do I go into the workforce? Do I go right out, or should I kind of come back, make that investment, take that time, take that money, but get an extra degree and get more out of it? So kind of you kind of talk about what in the decision of getting the degree in general, and then kind of why UConn specifically.
Yeah, and I have this conversation with particularly sport management students a lot. And as you see, even now, a lot of universities are wanting coaches to have master's degrees. Um, and so one of the couple things that kind of went into that decision for me was initially, and currently also, as well as being an assistant AD, I'm currently getting my PhD in sociology and Africana studies as well. Uh, and really the conversation that kind of sparked the grad program. So like I said earlier, I was a first generation um, student. Nobody in my family had gone and graduated to college. And so getting a bachelor's degree was kind of like top tier. Like we haven't done that yet. Um, and I was going through the process and I was having a conversation with Dr. Cooper, and we started talking about kind of what if the NFL doesn't work out? And
Mhm.
I was an okay player. I wasn't great by any means. I was solid. But in my head, it's NFL or bust, NFL or nothing. And I get to the end of my junior year, going to my senior year, and I'm looking at the draft boards, and I'm not on any of the draft boards, and I'm searching like the deep archives, like anybody who's ever created a draft
The
board ever.
subreddits going deep into the bloggers.
I'm like, yo, somebody has me somewhere, and I found one. It had like maybe 3 views. It was an article, and it had me going like the 7th round to the 49ers, and I'm like, somebody sees it. Um, I'm looking at the draft boards. I'm not on any of them, and I'm starting to get nervous. And I'm having a conversation with Dr. Cooper, and he's like, "Have you ever thought about grad school as being an option, and potentially maybe getting a PhD?" And at that time, in my head, it was I thought that I had a more realistic opportunity or a realistic chance to be an NFL vet for 10 years than I thought I could go get a master's degree and a PhD, and that was an issue. And so when we had that conversation and I said those words, I knew as it came out of my mouth saying being a 10-year NFL vet seems more plausible than being a professor, it didn't sound right. And so me and Dr. Cooper started to kind of unpack that and why did I think that is and what life events and what has my experience done to draw me to that conclusion. And then after having those conversations with Dr. Cooper, I thought that grad school would be a really good spot for me. University of Connecticut, one thing that drew me to that program was the professors that was there, Dr. McGarry, Dr. Cooper, um, Dr. Burton, and Dr. Ivanich. Those professors, like I had a really good relationship with them that, again, I highly encourage you, get outside your bubble, go talk to these professors, build that conversation, dive into Husky Sport. Husky Sport was something that I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a program where they go to Hartford and they do educational aspects around nutrition, food, and working out. It basically shows the median between athletics and education, and it tries to bridge that gap.
Yeah, it just a quick note on Husky Sport. It got disrupted a little bit with COVID, but
Yeah.
y'all that are interested in the sport management program here at UConn, you a required course is a class called Sport-Based Youth Development. And 90% of that course is literally volunteer hours with Husky Sport and reflecting on what you've done at Husky Sport. So Justin still runs that class. So
Yep.
obviously I had to take it through COVID, so a little bit different than what it normally would be. But everyone that's been to that program has said the same thing you are. It's an incredible experience, incredible way to kind of learn with your hands on. So
Yeah. And what it also does is I took that class seriously. I built relationships. I got to know Justin and all of them. And I was able to, when I applied for the grad program, because of that, I was able to apply for the GA. And so UConn, it was paid for. I was able to be a GA for Husky Sport, where I served 10 hours a week doing Husky Sport work. I served as a program director, and that covered my tuition, and they paid me a stipend. So a lot of universities have opportunities like that. And it's one of those things that, again, I took really seriously when I took the class and got to know Justin and them. And a lot of my friends didn't. They would lie about going to Husky Sport, and they were just kind of like trying to get by. And that class was a huge reason why I was able to get my master's degree completely paid for. And so on top of that, UConn is a top 10 sport management grad program in the country. And so that didn't hurt. The connections that I was able to form at my time there at UConn and the fact that I was able to get that GA helped out a whole lot. And so I would say too, the thought, and I know as you become like juniors and seniors, it's like, well, do I go back to grad school? Do I get this degree? What is the cost? How does all of that work? There are different ways to go about going to grad school to where you can limit your costs or have no cost. So a couple ways is one, if you're financially secure, do your thing. You go pay for it. You go wherever you want. Good luck and extremely blessed to be in that position. The other way is you can try to get a GA-ship. You can reach out to universities that have sport management programs. So what I did was, in particular, when I was doing my PhD, I would research the institutions that I was interested in. I would reach out to the professors and the faculty that was in that department and try to find some people with a similar area of research that I was interested in, and then start to build that connections. Because again, a lot of times, a lot of universities have GA and TA opportunities for master students to where they will pay your tuition and then you will get a stipend to kind of live off of for your 2 years there. The other way too is you could get a job as you're going through the job process. You can get a job, and a lot of, especially university jobs, even a lot of other jobs have it to where if you work there for a year, and this is something that I recommend if you're interested in doing it, ask them about, to where if you work there for a year or 6 months, they will do tuition reimbursement. So they will pay for you to get your degree either there or online or however it is, and you don't have to pay for it out of pocket because your work pays for it. So there are different ways. And then there's, again, a lot of scholarship opportunities I highly recommend. A buddy of mine got a scholarship for like $6,000 for writing a paper on his life experiences growing up, and he got a $6,000 scholarship. And there's a lot of those opportunities out there as well. So don't be afraid to just email. I emailed like hundreds and hundreds of professors. Most of them never responded. A couple of them did, and I got school paid for. So I would highly recommend just beating the drum, trying to reach out to as many professors and faculty members as you can, research the program, see if maybe your area of research or just any connection or anything aligns, and don't be afraid to reach out to, again, me, Dr. Cooper, because the sport management world is big, but it's very close. It seems like everybody that I've run into, they all know somebody that I know, and we have some type of connection. So at Virginia Tech, they don't have a sport management program for the PhD, but they have a sociology program, which I can concentrate in doing racial discrimination or race and sport and the intersection between race, sport, and education. There's so many different ways that you can tie athletics back into it. But I reached out to him, come to find out somebody there knew Dr. Cooper. We had a really good kind of connection. And as y'all know, in the sports world, connections are everything.
Everything.
That's how you move up. Unfortunately, that's how you get those positions. Even when I was looking to be a college coach, I applied for a bunch of them, but then one day I just hit a buddy up, and he's like, "Yeah, I know a position to open up down here. Shoot him a text." So that's just a couple of things when it comes to grad school that I would highly recommend pursuing.
Yeah, and just another reason is someone that's going through that grad school process right now. Another reason to know your professors really well and to have them as your best advocates, because like you said, the education world is small. Somebody knows somebody somewhere, and the best way to get in touch is if that professor of yours sends an email first with UCC'd, and now all of a sudden you're right in that, having that conversation. But I think you already started to kind of talk about it. But after masters, you end up at Washington and Lee. How do you kind of get there? Because I know that's going to be a question everyone asks is like, all right, cool, I got my master's, but now I'm still in that position where I'm trying to figure out how to transition into this world, how to get a job. So how did that process look for you?
So for me, I'm from Virginia. Washington and Lee University is in Virginia, and again, small world within sports. The offensive coordinator at WNL, I actually played against him in high school. He went to WNL, so we kind of knew each other from that, and that's how kind of that first my foot got in the door, and then went down for an interview, and everything just went really well, and I was fortunate enough to receive the opportunity. But with that, my second year in my grad program, when I'm about to finish up, I applied for hundreds of jobs. Every job that I was interested in, that I thought could lead to something that I wanted to do, I was applying for it, and it can get really overwhelming quickly when you apply to 20 jobs and you have no interview requests, and you're like, I just got this degree, I paid this money if you paid for it, and it's kind of a slow process. So it's one of those things, again, too, when you're doing your grad, when you're in grad school, go out and make those connections, go to conventions, talk to your professors and see what's going on out there. The sociology of sport, they have a conference every year, that becomes one big networking event. Sport admin has conferences every year, and it becomes a huge networking opportunity for people to kind of just go there, introduce themselves, and in that way, when you email them, you're like, hey, I'm blank. I saw you at this convention. It was really
Mhm.
nice speaking with you. And then 3 months later, when you're looking for a job, you can shoot them your resume and say, hey, if you hear of anything, please let me know. So the way that it worked out for me was, I saw that I got the opportunity, and it was for an assistant professor and assistant football coach. And luckily, like, when you're doing your grad, I was fortunate enough to get some coaching experience, and I was also fortunate enough to get some teaching experience. So that was helpful on top of the resume. I'll always tell people, having the degrees is great. That's really good, but having the degrees with experience is way better.
Mhm.
Um, and that's why I'm a huge fan of people even going to get a job and then getting their master's degree while they're working, whether it be at the university or place that you're at, or even online, knocking that out, but gaining some experience. So then that way, when you're going up against somebody who maybe doesn't have a master's degree, but they have 8 years of experience in that field, you have a fighting chance with that.
For sure. And so one thing I want to kind of pull out here is Washington and Lee's a D3 school, and I think the perception, at least that I kind of notice around at least undergrad, is a lot of times students, when they're kind of looking to get in that market, kind of look at the top tier. So if you're looking in sport com, you're thinking, oh, ESPN, or you don't really think about anything outside of ESPN. So for college athletics, it's a lot of times I want to work at a D1 school, Power Five conference, big athletic department, all that stuff, or I don't really not looking at anything else. So
Yep.
what was that decision like for you to go to a smaller Division 3 school where your responsibilities are a lot different compared to like a bigger D1 school?
Division one, I had an opportunity to go to a Division 1 school out in California, and I think for me, one of the reasons why I initially chose Division 3 is I was a Division 1 athlete, and I know what the coaches did, and I know what administration did, and I wanted to have a relationship with the coaches and the student athletes. I wanted to have some type of impact on them in the immediate. So that was my initial reasoning for wanting to go to Division 3. It's more responsibility. Um, is is one of those things that it doesn't sound glamorous. And when I got there, I loved it because I got to have that immediate impact on the student athletes. What we did impacted them on their day-to-day lives instead of just their entire 4-year career. And then you get to do a little bit of everything. I found that it's a really good way for me to gain experience if I ever want to go to Division 1. I won't say that Division 1 is out of the question for me, but I think right now in Shenandoah University, where I'm assistant AD, is a D3 school, and I really enjoy the the work-life balance that you get
Mhm.
at a Division 3 school. You'd be shocked that the pay is actually pretty good, and it definitely entices people to stay around.
Mhm.
Um, but also, I like being able to have a voice that can change some things within the systemic structures at a university to impact the student athletes. At a Alabama, if I see something going on, it's harder for me to say, hey, I want to speak to the president.
Mhm.
Um, and where I'm at now, we have really good relationships with the presidents. We get to talk with them regularly. I get to speak with the admissions process and the counselors and how that looks. And we all work together to kind of create this environment that we want. Um, and I also think that the division at the Division 3 level, the student athletes uh, they're not just student athletes. Like when you speak with them, they play a sport, but they're also like, hey, this is my goal that I want to do when I leave here.
Mhm.
And they get more of that, the holistic buzzword again. They get that environment. They get a holistic perspective of college, and they get to see college a different way as they go through it. And I think that it makes the administration job fun and really rewarding. So that's what's drawn. And I'm also particular about where I live at. I played football, and I didn't have a choice. So I'm from Virginia. I went to UConn because it was a really good opportunity, full ride. I had a couple other offers, and UConn kind of stood out to me because of the situation that they were in at the time.
Mhm.
And then I ended up going. I didn't have a choice to go to Seattle. Now some people love Seattle. I did not. It rained every day. That's not for me. That's not what I wanted.
Mhm.
Um, and so also too with the Division III job search, I have a little bit more control on where I go and the things that I get to do. And so that's huge for me as well when I'm going into the process of picking a career in a university to be at.
And I think you kind of mentioned it, but I don't think it's something a lot of people realize. In a lot of what your role was in a lot of D3 schools, you were both coaching
Yep.
and a professor at the same time. You had that dual role. So what is it like being like, I don't know how similar those roles are, maybe necessarily off the bat. Are you having to like switch it back and on and
Yeah.
off as you're going between the fields? And I guess was teaching something, I know you obviously played football for a while, so I can imagine coaching might have been around, but was teaching something you were always interested in? Or did you just kind of fall back into it?
I kind of stumbled into teaching. And I found that I really like it. It's a lot like coaching. The impact that you get to have is profound. Like again, a lot of times from my experiences, when I think back on some of the biggest impact or influential people personally that I've had the opportunity to learn from and grow from have been coaches and teachers. And it's really rewarding. It's tough, but it's really rewarding. And then what I also liked about that is I got to see and then stay reminded of the perspective of student athletes from both lenses, one as an athlete but also as a student. And I think that
Mhm.
that made me a better coach. I think that it made me a more rounded coach. I was able to understand what the student athletes were going through. I was able to relate to them a whole lot. And I thought that that relationship that we were able to build, I thought that it really took off on the field and seeing the production that we were having. And I think that it just kind of came from one, they knew that I cared about them more than just what they can do on the field as an athlete, but I cared about their entire person and what they wanted to do. And we was able to have a lot of conversations outside of sports. I was able to have conversations with my receivers who I was coaching about academics, athletics, and everything in between that, because we weren't always only together on the field or in the weight room or the meeting room, but we were also having these communications inside the classroom as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you actually got to know them as people, like you said, as individuals, not just this is the kid I coach. I see him however many hours a day, and then he goes home, and I don't ever see him again. I don't know what, this whole other portion of his life. So it sounds like it's a really unique opportunity, especially when you're talking about D1 jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Division I is definitely different in that regards.
Yeah. We'll probably do about one more question or so, and then we'll open it up to questions for everyone else. So just thinking about if you want to hop on and ask after this. So at Shenandoah, part of your job right now is kind of diversity, inclusion, equity. All of the things are incredibly important, obviously. I think we can all agree on that at least. But in an ideal world, these things already exist within the job field. We don't have to have someone specialize in making sure they are monitored, because hopefully we could just be good people and they would exist. But that's just not the world we live in. It's not the world we live in college athletics. It's probably not the world we live in any other industry. So what is it like is a job trying to address these things? For a long time they were ignored. It wasn't even a concern, let alone a position dedicated to it. But these
Yeah.
weren't conversations happening at any level of the
Yeah.
department.
So it's interesting because on top of the actual athletics aspect, I am one of the chief diversity officers on campus, and there's three of us. Um, and I think for me, when we talk about the DEI work, and I think that it's important too. So when I'm talking to coaches or faculty or whoever it is, I think that it's important to one, kind of understand what that means. A lot of times when we hear DEI work, we think it's Black and brown people, and that's what it is aimed towards. And I think that's because it's a huge point. It's a huge problem, particularly when we see graduation rates, when we see the kind of educational gap just throughout the country, and why that is, and looking at the resources um, that kind of show those issues. The one thing that I try to do is I try to humanize what DEI work is, and I like to focus a lot on the inclusion aspect because at some point, everybody in this group at the universities everywhere, somebody has been in a position where they felt excluded from something. It could have been you didn't get invited to the party in third grade that all your friends went to, and you felt excluded at that point. And the number one thing is I like to try to humanize, okay, what was that feeling? How did you feel? And how did that affect you? When we look at athletics and even businesses across the country, um, organizations, universities, and companies that do a really good job of making people feel like they belong at a place, and that the people there want them there, regardless of differences in the way you look, talk, dress, act, what you believe, your political ideologies, whatever the case is, being able to create an atmosphere where everybody feels that they have a voice and that they are important, it makes production better.
Mhm.
Across the board, people just do better. They work better. They want to go to work. They want to do these things. So one, just kind of understanding the importance of that from if you just purely want to do it out of production, understanding the importance of that. And I hope we don't. I hope that we genuinely want people to feel welcomed and want to learn their life experiences. And then I think going to that part is it, there hasn't been a lot of times where I've been at maybe universities or giving talks where I'm having a conversation with somebody and they just want to be discriminatory. Like they just actually want to be discriminatory too much. I don't see it on a person to person. It's a system that's a systemic issue. And there's been things that's happened to kind of mold that problem, right? And so the toughest part is addressing the root causes on what's going on, and not even so much trying to kind of reach across the aisle peer to peer, but addressing, well, for example, when I was at WNL, one of the reasons that I decided to get into administration was I was recruiting a student athlete from Louisiana. He had really good SAT scores, done everything well, had a great GPA. And WNL is a hard school to get into. The football team, the average SAT score was a 1450. And that's on the football team. It's a tough school to get into.
Mhm.
And I was recruiting a kid from a really under-resourced area. And on his transcripts, he had one AP course, and typically they like to see 4 to 5. And unfortunately, and we couldn't recruit him. He wouldn't get into the school because of that. And when we looked at the school profile at the high school that he went to, that high school offered one AP course. It's not that kid's fault that he didn't have 4 or 5 courses. It wasn't his fault. His circumstances did that. And so, what ways can we look at the admissions process that can kind of eliminate issues like that? That's the hard part. Because and then you have that it's a tough conversation, and then it's also how do you fairly and accurately measure somebody's ability to be successful at that university or college. And so those are tough conversations, and I think that those are typically often the most difficult ones. But I think peer to peer is really just reaching across an aisle and saying, hey, we're a little bit different. We have different thoughts. We can disagree on a lot of different things. If taxes should be higher or lower, I think we can disagree on that and still be able to go grab a coffee.
Mhm.
But we don't have to actually hate each other because of that. But we can also agree that racism is wrong. Like you can be a conservative and say, hey, racism's wrong. And
Yeah. We
that's
don't have
not,
to politicize
yeah.
humanity and human rights.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then so it's having those conversations. And again, it's just through the humanization, actually having the conversations. I think that that's where we see the greatest shift towards that inclusive environment.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point. Something I kind of see working in college athletics is a lot of times it's approached, DI is approached in like a very matter of fact, statistical manner. Like, can we hit these quotas? Can we literally just do this so these numbers and these percentages look like that? I think you bring up a good point. Is let's take a step back. What if we just look at it from humanity? Let's actually think what these people are going through before we start looking at these actual numbers, because it's more than just these numbers. And I think that's where we have to then start solving the systemic things, like you said.
Yep.
With that, does anyone have any other questions for Deshon? Again, you can unmute yourself, free for you to ask that way, or you can also type it in the chat if you feel more comfortable doing it that way, and we can read it out. Up to y'all. But I want to open up the floor.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for joining us today. Just curious, once you get your PhD, do you think you're going to want to continue down the path of becoming athletic director or becoming a professor? Or I don't know if in D3 you continue to do both throughout your entire career. So which one have you enjoyed more and maybe why?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that I constantly think about. Right now, I'm teaching at Shenandoah University too. I teach a sport marketing class, and so that's one of the really cool things too. Is you get to do both. When I get my PhD, I really don't know. A part of me wants to stay in administration and maybe try to climb that ladder to assistant dean, dean, provost, that area. The other part of me just loves athletics so much that I think being an athletics director is still kind of the goal for me. We'll kind of see where life takes me. I think right now I'm just trying to be in the now and really do a really good job at the job that I have now, and then allow opportunities to present themselves instead of trying to look really far ahead and maybe do a mediocre job and hinder myself in the future. So that's a really good question, and I'd be interested to see what happens as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll ask a question. Thank you for joining us as well. If you could go back to your freshman year of college, or even just coming into college, and give yourself one word of advice, what would you say?
Relax a little bit. I get it. It's a rat race, and right, especially when you're in college, it's like every day, like, all right, I need a job. What's my job going to be when I graduate? I want to do this, that. Like I was like 18, like, all right, I want to be 10-year NFL, or I want to be like an athletics director by 25. And I'm like, unrealistic. And it was constant. It was daily. Like I was on Indeed daily trying to find jobs, trying to figure out what my next step was going to be. And I think that what I would tell myself is to do that, prepare for your future. That's important, but also really get to embrace where you are now, because you get to be a student. Like the undergrad level, I was thinking about it today, like how much I just missed being an undergrad and being with my friends and that experience, because it goes by pretty quickly. And it's like snap your fingers, and I'm 28 now, and it doesn't seem like it was 10 years ago that I was 18, getting ready, like getting in college and going through that process. So enjoy the now and work for your future, but really experience where you're at.
Awesome. Thank you.
Was there any like career or academic mistake that kind of gave you a big lesson that you reflect back on now?
Definitely. My freshman year, I was on academic probation, because I was a procrastinator. I was a bad procrastinator. And what that did was I got the work done. It just wasn't great. And it also would stress me out because I had a day and a half to write a 20-page report on this. And so that was the one thing that, as I kind of progressed, is I got better at not procrastinating, because I actually like, and I don't know if y'all were like me, but if I seen on the syllabus that, all right, I got a 10-page paper and it's going to be due in December, in my head, I'm like, all right, in like September, I'm gonna write like a paragraph every week. So that way when December comes, it's all done. And then December comes and I'm like, crap, I have to write 10 pages in like 18 hours. But I actually, when I got into grad school, I actually started to take the approach to be proactive. And even if it was just writing a paragraph a day, it would take me 20 minutes. And by the time the semester ended, I'm like, oh man, like I actually do have everything right here, and I can just edit it, and I don't have to kill myself trying to turn in a crappy 20-page report because I waited to the last minute. So that for me, procrastination was my worst enemy. I highly recommend prioritizing and setting a schedule and doing your best to stick to it.
Thank you.
I don't know about everyone else, but I can definitely relate to those first semester freshman year gen eds.
Yeah.
Being a big jump from high school and like being a high school procrastinator and learning a big lesson and like that's not gonna fly here in college. So
No.
I feel that.
And I will say that your grad school is very different than undergrad. Undergrad, you're doing gen ed, you're doing things. I took geology. I had no interest in geology. So it made it tougher. But grad school, you get to learn about the things you're actually passionate about, you're curious about, and it makes it a little bit easier with that. A lot of writing and reading, though. By far the most writing and reading you will do.
I had a question. Since it definitely sounds like you have a very like wide range of tasks in your job, whether it's teaching or diversity inclusion, whatever it may be. What would you say like your favorite part about your responsibilities are, and like what's something else that you don't like as much?
Compliance can be boring at times. I'd say compliance is one of those. It's just tedious. So that's part of the job that is important too, though. If I want to be an AD, having that experience, and it was the reason why I took the job because of the broad range of responsibilities that I would have. My favorite part about the job is being able to just stop by practices and actually like watch practices, get to community, and that's a part of my job. I go there and I'm showing support for the student athletes and building that relationship. And so I like the flexibility of, for me, having a strict office job was tough to have, like for me to kind of think going to an office from 9 to 5 and I'm at a desk. That was tough for me. Some people can do it, more power to you. But I like the flexibility of being able to kind of get up, multitask, and my days never look the same. One day, like Monday, it snowed, so that day was unbelievably hectic. And then Tuesday, it was completely hectic in a different way, but it's really fun and I enjoyed that process. And I think that's the one thing too that D3 offers you, that D1 is you do become extremely specialized at that level. But again, I never know. I might try to go the D1 route if I feel that that's a calling for me.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've worked in compliance for 2 years here at UConn, and as soon as Frank asked that question, I'm like, if he doesn't say compliance is an important part of his job, he's crazy, man.
It gets tedious.
It does. I know we're about almost out of time, but we still have time for maybe like one more question if anyone has one. Nope. All right. Well, Deshon, thank you for coming on so much. We appreciate it. Everyone, thank you for hopping on. Hopefully UConn will get another win tonight, and we'll keep it rolling. We'll see hopefully y'all back next week for sport trivia. Have a great night, y'all.
Sounds good. Thank y'all.
I'm really happy you shared that that story about that recruit, Deshon. Oh, I think he hopped off. Never mind. Well, it looks like no one has any questions.
Sounds good. All right. Anything you need from me right now?
No, just check the interview schedule. And yeah, like I said, let me know if anything changes, but hopefully we'll get them all done this week. So.
All right. Sounds good. See you tomorrow then on
Yeah,
the first one. Do I need to go anywhere before, like for the 5 o'clock interview, which is the first one? Like, is there links? Did I miss the links to each
Zoom
one?
links. There's a Google Doc literally in that folder that just says Zoom links. It's like broken down by interview.
Oh.
So you can pop in the Zoom link. And like I said, just you can give a quick read of their resume, just a refresher before we get into it.
Perfect. All right.
All right. See you, man.
See ya.